Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff happening right now in the sports world. So today here on the channel, I'm just going to give you a little bit of the news and the notes in the world of sports on this Tuesday. First, we'll start with the NBA. We're about 2 weeks into the season now, and who would have ever thought that 2 weeks into the season, the best team in the Eastern Conference would be the New York Knicks. And out west, it's the Jazz and the Warriors. Now, of course, the Warriors are pretty much always up there as long as Curry and Green or Curry and Thompson or a combination of those are healthy. And the Jazz, they've pretty much been a pretty good regular season team now for a couple of years. Their problem is they look great in the regular season and get in the playoffs, and they're just not any good. So maybe they'll be able to continue that this year when the playoffs do come around. And, of course, the Knicks were good last year, but so far this year, in this first 2 weeks of the season, they're playing even better than they were last year. And, of course, I know before the season started, I talked about the new foul rule was going to affect a lot of the players, and it's affected James Harden big time. Last week, towards the middle of the week, the Nets were complaining about James Harden not being efficient enough on offense, but that's because James Harden's offense was always go to the foul line and shoot 25 free throws a game, and that's where half his points came from. So with this new foul call in effect, he's not being able to go to the foul line that much, so it's turned him into a decent offensive player, which is what he's always been in the first place. And, of course, my Pelicans are the worst team in basketball right now, got a whopping 1 win on the season. Now, Saturday night, when they played the Knicks, they had to play without Zion and Brandon Ingram. Without those two guys, they probably wouldn't win more than 10 games on the season. But they claim Zion is back practicing, but they're not rushing him back. They want to make sure he is fully healthy. And, of course, tonight we've got game number 6 in the World Series after the Astros won Game 5, 9-5 on Sunday night. Hopefully the Braves will wrap it up tonight, because if it goes to a Game 7 tomorrow night after the Astros won Game 5 in Atlanta and Game 6 in Houston, all the pressure is back on the Braves. So if it goes to 7 games, I have to say the Astros will probably win it. So if the Braves want to win it, I think they need to wrap it up tonight. In the world of NASCAR, if you're a NASCAR fan, the final race of the season is this Sunday, and the 4 guys contending for the championship are Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr., and Chase Elliott. So, of course, if you're a fan of one of those 4 drivers, you want your driver to win. If not, if you want to see a driver win his first championship, you want to pull for Kyle Larson or Denny Hamlin. They have never won a championship. A lot of people say that outside of Mark Martin, Denny Hamlin is the second best driver to never win a championship. I don't quite think they're in the same category, because if you have followed NASCAR for a long time, then you know anybody that's ever met Mark Martin will tell you he is the most honest, genuine human being you could ever meet in your life. And Mark Martin drove in NASCAR for 60 years, and the only 2 times he ever got penalized for cheating just so happened to be the 2 times that he finished the last race leading the championship and got penalized just enough points to where the guy behind him could win the title. And one time it was Dale Earnhardt, and the other time it was Tony Stewart. Now, had he done that against Ricky Craven or Ricky Rudd or somebody like that, nothing would have got said. But they're not going to let Mark Martin win a championship over Dale Earnhardt or Tony Stewart. So in my mind, Mark Martin is a 2-time NASCAR champion. Denny Hamlin has never sniffed a championship. I think Mark Martin combined finished 2nd or 3rd about 10 times in his career. Denny Hamlin very rarely finishes 2nd or 3rd. He usually makes the playoffs, and by the 2nd round, he's out, if not 3rd round. This year is one of the few times he actually makes it to the final round, so maybe he'll win a championship this Sunday if you're a Denny Hamlin fan. In the world of the NFL, the Cowboys keep winning. They're playing phenomenal football right now. I continue to be impressed with their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore. A lot of folks were concerned going into Sunday's game because of the fact Dak Prescott was out, and their backup was Cooper Rush, who I believe had thrown 5 passes in his NFL career leading up to that game. So you would think somebody like the Cowboys would have a pretty decent backup. Like last year you had Andy Dalton, but of course they let Andy Dalton go, and of course he's with the Bears now and he's out injured as well. But the Cowboys apparently didn't think they needed a good backup in Dak's spot. But Sunday they played Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't have a great offense, so you don't need a great offense to beat Minnesota. But if the Cowboys want to make a deep run in the playoffs, they will need Dak back and Dak back healthy. So we'll see how long he is out. I think the Browns rushed back Baker Mayfield, but I think that had more to do with Baker Mayfield. I personally think Baker Mayfield's overrated. I think Lincoln Riley made him look better than what he really is. And he's afraid if he's out too long, he'll lose his contract because Baker Mayfield is up for a long-term contract after the season, and he's trying to get a butt ton of money. But the Browns' backup is Case Keenum, and Case Keenum is actually a formidable backup. He could start for a lot of teams right now, and I think Baker Mayfield was scared if he missed 3 or 4 games and the Browns won without him. Come off season, he asked for a big contract. The Browns are going to say, we just won with Case Keenum. We don't need you, Baker. But they lost to the Steelers, only scored 10 points, so it did Baker no good to play, but he was back on Sunday. Speaking of injuries, the Titans look like they've lost Derrick Henry for the season. He suffered a bad injury on Sunday, but Derrick Henry says he will be back this season. And also, speaking of injuries, the Saints lost Jameis Winston to an injury on Sunday. And, of course, their backup is Trevor Siemian. And I bet 95% of football fans, without using Google or Wikipedia, could not tell you what college that Trevor Siemian played for. But back when Drew Brees played, people always tried to say that Drew Brees was not that good, that Drew Brees was a system quarterback. And I think now it's pretty obvious that there was some truth to that, especially if you watch the Saints. The last 3 or 4 years of Drew Brees' career, he couldn't throw the ball 10 yards because he was just old. His arm was worn out. But he still managed to throw 400 yards a game because of the system Sean Payton runs. And now this year, they're 5-2 with Jameis Winston and now Trevor Siemian. And, of course, before the season, everybody said that the Saints are going to be terrible with Jameis Winston, but they're winning with Jameis Winston. And I got to give Sean Payton credit because obviously he knows what he's doing. There's also been a lot of people that have always said that Tom Brady was a system quarterback, because if you watch the Patriots or now the Bucs, 95% of the time, Tom Brady never throws the ball more than 15 yards downfield because he doesn't have that strong of an arm. But when he was with New England, now with Tampa Bay, they always find ways to work around that. Well, of course, Tom Brady still plays, so you can't prove whether or not that's true. But I think now with Drew Brees being retired and Sean Payton winning with Jameis Winston, who everybody said was terrible, and Trevor Siemian, that I think Sean Payton knows how to run an offense around a quarterback that doesn't have the strongest arm. And then in the world of college football, we know that LSU, Washington State, Texas Tech, and USC already had coaching vacancies. Well, now you can add TCU to the list because on Sunday night, Gary Patterson was relieved of his duties. And, of course, a few weeks back here on the channel, when I talked about the coaches that have the top 10 longest current tenured, Gary Patterson was number 2 on the list, right behind Iowa's Kirk Ferentz. And, of course, he's no longer their coach. The athletic director of TCU says he gave Gary Patterson the chance to finish out the season and then after the season no longer be the coach, but stay on in some kind of off-the-field role. Gary Patterson said, no, go ahead and fire me now. At his age, he may go ahead and call it a career. He may take a year or two off and be coaching somewhere else in a couple of years. We'll have to sit back and wait and find out. I don't think Gary Patterson is a bad coach. I mean, TCU, if you look, they had about 40 years of just being flat out terrible when Gary Patterson took over. And then when he took over, they had about a 10-year stretch where they were a top 10 team. So obviously, he knows what he's doing. I just think it was to the point where he just been there so long and wore out his welcome. And what he did 10 years ago just no longer worked. But some of the names already in the rumor mill to take his spot are Art Briles, Jeff Traylor, Billy Napier, and Hugh Freeze. And, of course, we know Hugh Freeze is the coach at Liberty, but we know he's not going to stay at Liberty forever. And, of course, they claim that he'll never again be allowed to coach in the SEC. We'll have to sit back and wait and see if that's true. If so, then he may take the Texas Tech job or the TCU job or the USC job because they're not in the SEC. But if he doesn't take those jobs, he will eventually coach somewhere besides Liberty one day. And, of course, Jeff Traylor is the current coach of the Roadrunners, and the Roadrunners have never been good until Jeff Traylor got there. Obviously, he would leave to go to Texas Tech or TCU. And Billy Napier is still the supposed leading candidate for the LSU job. I still think it goes to Mel Tucker. That's who they want, and I think there's two reasons for that. One reason is he's turned Michigan State around in 2 years. The second reason is the last time LSU hired a Michigan State coach, it was, of course, Nick Saban, who won them a national championship. So I think they think Mel Tucker can do the same thing Nick Saban did. And Art Briles, if you recall, was the coach at Houston from 2002 to 2007, and then left Houston and went to Baylor and coached Baylor from 2008 until 2015, when he had to leave because of all sorts of off-the-field issues. But Art Briles will be 66 years old next month. So even if he does come to coach Texas Tech or TCU, he's probably only going to coach for 4 or 5 years unless he plans on coaching until he's in his late 70s, early 80s. So if you are Texas Tech or TCU, do you really want to hire a guy that's that old and think he's going to stay there long term, or do you want to hire him to turn your program around and make you good, and as soon as he gets hired, already be talking about who's going to replace him in 4 to 5 years? That's a possibility as well, and I know I mentioned it over the weekend, but I'll mention it one more time. The SEC claims that next month, Mike Leach and Brian Harsin will be terminated if they don't follow SEC rules. So that might be 2 more head coaching jobs that'll be available coming up before the end of the season. And then one last note on college football head coaches. If you follow the channel, before the season started, I said this would be Dan Mullen's last year in Florida, but not because he would get fired, because he would leave to go to the NFL. And I still think that's the case because Dan Mullen has an ego the size of the planet. And Dan Mullen is not going to let himself get fired. And Dan Mullen can look at his resume, and he knows his resume is not that impressive. It's just not that good. And he knows if he comes back next year and has the same kind of year he's having this year, he'd get fired. So I still say he leaves to go to the NFL, but a lot of the Florida fans want him gone now because of what he said in his weekly press conference yesterday. He was asked about recruiting, and basically, long story short, Dan Mullen said, we're in football season right now. We're not recruiting. We'll recruit when the season's over. And of course, if you follow football, that recruiting is a year-round thing. You don't just recruit during the off-season. You recruit even in season. But a lot of folks don't know that Dan Mullen has a 1-year show cause where he cannot recruit off campus. So I'm sure that probably makes it hard to recruit right now when you're pretty much on campus all the time because you're coaching. But he's not going to say that. But when you just got destroyed by your rival, you can't say something like that. But Dan Mullen always says stupid stuff, so that's nothing new. But we know their biggest rival is probably Florida State. But for most people, a rivalry can only be a rivalry if both teams are either really, really good or really, really bad. And there was a time when Florida State was good and Florida sucked. And now we're at the time where Florida State sucks and Florida's good. So right now, that's not their rival. So their biggest rival right now is probably Georgia. So you can't say something like that when you're coming off a game against your rival where you just got embarrassed. So a lot of the Florida fans are now wanting Dan Mullen gone because of the fact that not only is he not recruiting, but he's 4-4 and said something that stupid after getting embarrassed by his arch rival just 48 hours earlier. But Florida's last 4 games are all winnable games, and they should win all 4 games. But if you think the Dan Mullen hot seat rumors are going now, just wait and see how bad it's going to be if they lose one of these last 4 games, especially if it is to the aforementioned Florida State Seminoles, because they have no business losing to Florida State. Now, I know I've said it before and I'll say it again that if Florida State gives Mike Norvell a chance, he has them going in the right direction, but there's still a long way to go. They ain't got no business beating Florida right now. So if you think the Dan Mullen hot seat rumors are they're going rampant now, just wait how bad they get if they lose to South Carolina or Florida State. But I think he leaves to go to the NFL. So not only do we have the TCU job, the USC job, the Texas Tech job, the Washington State job, and the LSU job, we might have the Auburn job and the Mississippi State job and the Florida job all open before the season comes to an end. If you have any thoughts on any of the topics I covered today, please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. I am really suffering from procrastination today and am fully committed to doing something about it in a little while. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.